There's, I think, a lot more cricket fans in general who just feel a little bit unsatisfied.
It was an impressive performance from England, but the story is this pitch.
He hasn't made that big score yet. There's a lot of time for the selectors to look at other options.
There's been so much pressure on coach Brendan McCullum across this Ashes series, and rightly so. Well, it feels like a somewhat familiar story in this Ashes series. Dan and I standing here at the end of the day trying to sum up something that was, well, pretty hard to sum up. And what we have seen here in the Boxing Day test in Melbourne is just that as well. For the first time in 94 years, the MCG has hosted a two-day test match, and now this Ashes series has featured two of them. And that is something that has never happened in a series when test matches have been played over 5 days. Sam Jordan from 9 News, joined by Dan Bredig from the Age, and all of that. I didn't even say the fact that England has won their first test match down under in 15 years.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest about this one. I think a number of us came here this morning thinking that there was a chance that we'd have another two-day test, but it's still quite another thing to have the reality play out in front of you. And yeah, England got the chocolates this week. They've waited a long time to win a test match in Australia, so you know, a lot of credit needs to go to them for playing the situation very well today. They were excellent with the ball. In particular, you know, a couple of their guys like Bryden Cass really stepped up after Gus Atkinson went down with a hamstring, and yeah, put the Australians under pressure and left England with a target that they could chase. A bit like Australia in the first test in Perth, where you could basically play it as a white ball game, be aggressive even though the conditions were difficult. But I've got to say, and I think this is also true of the Perth test, any test match that's over in 2 days just doesn't feel like a test match. And, you know, there's no ebb and flow, there's no, I suppose, quiet periods in the game where you can appreciate the loud ones or the action-packed periods. And yeah, there's a lot of happy English fans in Melbourne right now, but there's, I think, a lot more cricket fans in general who just feel a little bit unsatisfied.
Yeah, that's right. We've been saying right across this series that England had shown they didn't have what it takes to compete with Australia over 5 days to win a test match. Well, here on this surface, they didn't need to. They only needed to as well. For what it's worth, we did actually ask our English journalist friend Cameron Ponsonby to come down and gloat in our faces after we did get to rub it into him in Adelaide, but he was unable to step away from his desk. Damn. It was an impressive performance from England, but the story is this pitch, and it was the story yesterday as well. After 20 wickets did fall on day one. Yeah, it is a nightmare result for Cricket Australia, and it's a costly one as well.
Yeah, so the estimate is about $10 million of lost revenue. That number would come down again if you take out the costs, I suppose, of opening the ground for a couple more days. But that's a big number. It's a lot more than Perth. And yeah, just to think that there were going to be 90,000 plus people here tomorrow who've all got to make other plans, yeah, that does leave a bit of taste in the mouth for administrators, but for players as well. Neither Steve Smith nor Ben Stokes thought it was great to have two test matches that only go for 2 days in the same Ashes series, yeah, Ben Stokes at least made it clear that his feedback to the match officials about the pitch wouldn't be particularly positive. Steve Smith took a slightly different tack, and I think gave us a little bit of an insight into how much the Australian team, you know, chat and build a relationship with the curators about what they're doing. He said that, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe Matt Page should have shaved a couple of millimetres more grass off the pitch from the 10 millimetres down to 7 or 8, which is what it was last year for the Boxing Day test against India. One of the more surreal sights of a very surreal day was after we'd finished hearing from the captains, we all went back up to the press box and saw the MCC ground staff actually mowing the pitch, taking some grass off. Now, in terms of, you know, there's been a number of moments in this series where we've said too late, particularly in terms of the way England have changed the way they play, but that's the ultimate too late moment in this series, the grass coming off the pitch after the game's over in 2 days.
It feels a bit like hiding the smoking gun, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, I think it's very, you know, it's widely known what level the grass was at before the game, so I don't think there'll be any getting away from that in terms of how the International Cricket Council rate the pitch. But yeah, it's one where I mean, you know, Steve Smith talked about it in terms of a learning process for the curator, but yeah, you think back to the morning before day one, and Stuart Fox, the CEO of the MCC, was very confident that this was going to be a rip-roaring test match that went went the distance. Todd Greenberg said he was hoping for 5 days. This morning on radio before play, he actually said he was hoping that Australia would be 5 for 275 at stumps. That's a long way from what the reality turned out to be. And interestingly enough, both Matt Page and Stuart Fox are going to be talking to us first thing tomorrow here. And they're going to get some pretty tricky questions, I dare say.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was going to note that as well. That is going to be very interesting viewing too. And of course, you can see all of that on the Age of Sydney Morning Herald and 9 News tomorrow night as well. But Dan, with all of that said, I find it really difficult to actually kind of review the test match through the lens of performances and analysing those performances because Australia just simply looks like they couldn't do it. They made the pitch look unplayable, and then all of a sudden England walk out and they actually made it look pretty easy for a while there.
Yeah, well, I think that's what happens in a fourth innings chase. Teams are so much more confident about a chase these days. As I said earlier, like it's a situation where the number of runs is finite. And that changes the attitude of both the batting team and the bowling team. Ben Stokes did say that it was still very, very difficult conditions. They had to be positive. They had to think about trying to put the bowlers under pressure in a way that I guess Bazball has done at times over the past couple of years. He actually said that in his mind, chasing 175 on that wicket was a bit more like chasing 340, which was an interesting conceptual
big number.
comment. Yeah, I don't quite agree with that one personally, but it was definitely the case that he was proud of the way that you think about Ben Duckett, who's had a horrible tour. He really went out after it and got England away to a good start. They had a 51-run opening stand between Duckett and Zach Crawley. That was critical to how the rest of the game played out. Steve Smith, interestingly enough, admitted that he'd thought about giving the new ball to Scott Boland, and maybe again with the benefit of hindsight, he would have got Boland into the attack a bit earlier than he did, because he didn't come on until I think it was the 11th over, and by that stage England already had 70 on the board. So there's a few sliding doors moments there for Australia. But as we saw with England in Perth, if you've got that sort of smallish fourth innings target, you don't actually have that much time if the batting side takes the positive option. That's what England did.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, with all of that in mind, let's have a look at some of the performances, because the one that is certainly in the spotlight is Cameron Green. He's got plenty of criticism for the way that he was dismissed today. There's been, mounting pressure on Cameron Green's performances over the course of this Ashes series as well. And when you have a player who has proven himself to be as capable as Bo Webster waiting in the wings, proven himself to do that at the SCG like he did last summer, I think there's going to be a bit of talk, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Cam's place going into Sydney.
Well, when you think about some of the dismissals in this game, one that stood out to me was Bryden Cast bowling Travis Head. It was kind of a version of that famous Ryan Harris ball to Alistair Cook all those years ago in Perth, seaming and beating the bat. But in terms of Cameron Green, that was just one dismissal that you couldn't really blame the pitch for. It was a shortish, wideish ball from Ben Stokes. He probably could have cut it. He probably could have played a decisive, aggressive shot to it and got away with runs. But it was just that indeterminate, almost hanging the bat out kind of shot, giving slips, catching practice. And that was the beginning of the end for Australia in terms of not being able to set a score. Probably they would have been hoping to set England about 250, I reckon, in the fourth innings. And the Australian tail really melted away after that, as they did in the first innings. And so the question for the Australian selectors is do we play Cameron Green again batting at number 7, or do we give Bo Webster an opportunity in Sydney as they'd done a year ago?
Yeah, that's right. There's actually been a bit of speculation, plenty of heat on Marnus Labuschagne, which I found surprising as well. Obviously, he hasn't had the series that he would have liked, but he scored the mountain of runs to get into this Ashes. Is there rising pressure on Marnus?
I think there's been rising pressure on Marnus from Marnus. The fact that he knows that in this series he's been batting well, but he hasn't got a score. You could see the disappointment today in the fact that it was a low catch to Joe Root. There have been some quite varying interpretations of those kinds of catches over the past few years. You think back to the Adelaide Test and the low one that Alex Carey was denied. That moment was a significant one in the match, but it was a significant one for Marnus Labuschagne, and he reacted like someone who was very disappointed. He knows he's left runs out in the middle of this series. I think he's still playing in the way that the Australian team want him to play. He's turned down that more positive pathway of trying to score runs, but he hasn't made that big score yet. And when you think about Australia's next test match after this series isn't until August against Bangladesh, there's a lot of time for the selectors to look at other options.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One player that no doubt there will be a lot of talk about as well over the next few days too is Usman Khawaja. Speculation was rife coming into the summer that this would be Usman's last in the side. Well, he's been dropped. He fought his way back in this series, and now we're heading to his hometown of Sydney, where the stage would be set for a fitting farewell from Test cricket, but we still don't know whether or not he does want to take that option. I do hope that if he is going to retire at the end of this summer, Dan, how nice would it be to have the chance to celebrate Usman if he goes down that path?
Yeah, we had a chat to David Warner actually earlier today, who's obviously close with Usman. He didn't really declare it either way, but certainly was clear that it would be something that would be on Usman Khawaja's mind. I felt that his dismissal today was not a particularly good one. It illustrated the lack of trust that the Australians had in the pitch by that stage. He got a pretty good short ball. He was initially looking like he was going to duck it, then sort of played a hook shot at it a little bit late in the piece and was caught at fine leg. That's sort of dismissal that doesn't look great. So he's got some thinking to do about whether he pulls the pin, I guess before or after the Sydney Test, and that's one again for both Khawaja and the selectors to have a bit of a chat about.
Bit on the selection table in terms of the bowling attack as well, not because anyone's out of form, but just because they have so many options now as well. Mitchell Starc said before this test match that he would not be sitting out any tests this summer. I guess they didn't have to bowl too many overs here in Melbourne and have plenty of time to recover, but there are some options there, and I guess the decision is there to play Todd Murphy as well.
Yeah, well, I suppose a little bit like we had this week in Melbourne, we'll go to Sydney and find out what the pitch looks like, how much grass they've left on it.
Can you imagine if we get there and it's green?
Well, if you think about it, 12 months ago, the Sydney Test was over really quickly. It was a 3-day game, and the pitch was doing a lot. And that occasion was obviously heightened by the fact that it was still a live series and Australia had to win the match to ensure that they got the Border Gavaskar trophy back. This is a different case. I think all parties concerned are just going to be hoping for a good game of cricket, and probably one that lasts for twice as many days as this one, and I'd include the players in that. If that is the case, you'd like to think that the ground staff at the SCG would be looking to prepare a traditional SCG wicket, one that spins, and one that Todd Murphy can have an opportunity.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're pouring concrete out in the middle of the SCG tonight to ensure that it does get to 5 days. Dan, one more question before we go as well about England. We did speak about them at the top, but there's been so much pressure on coach Brendan McCullum across this Ashes series, and rightly so. They've been absolutely woeful for the most part, but they have a test victory here. They have their tails up. They've finally broken the drought. They had the opportunity to go to Sydney and make it 3-2 as well, and they did it playing aggressive cricket today. Is there hope for Baz moving forward?
I don't think this test match really proves or determines a whole lot in the wider scheme of things as far as the Bazball project is concerned. There was so much in the pitch, the way that the game played out. England were better with the ball, I think, in this game than they had been at times earlier in the series. But batting-wise, I think the jury's still very much out. And in that fourth inning scenario, as I said, it is a very different game. It is much more like a white ball game. So, I don't think that is necessarily going to move the dial one way or the other for McCullum. But what it will do is it will give a younger generation of English players, so Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, Jacob Bethel, who returned to the team in this game, Josh Tong, the fast bowler, who was brilliant really for England in both innings. Those guys have now got a experience of what it is to win a test match in Australia. That should help them down the track in terms of coming back here with some positive memories, coming back here also with a thirst for more, to not just win a test match in Australia, but win a series. Like I think back to that match that we all remember for Steve Waugh making 100 in January 2003. It was January 2003. That game was also a test match that England won, and most of that England team went on to win the Ashes in England in 2005. So those sorts of games, even though the Ashes is decided, can have an effect that is seen and heard down the years.
Well, we have a longer break before we next join you in Sydney as well. I think some of the English supporters in the Barmy Army might need that longer break too. They were absolutely flooding out of the MCG, full of festivities as well, celebrating England's first test match win in almost 15 years. The whitewash is over. The drought has been broken for England, and that is a test match that we will be talking about for a very long time. For more, as always, do check out The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald for more in-depth analysis, as well as 9 News, the daily news reports, which do seem to be never ending at this point of the tour. And we will see you in Sydney. We look forward to your company then.